And before you meet this extraordinary cast, there's a few other people I'd like you to get to know. You know, it takes a village to raise a child and a play. I want you to meet the village. We have Chrissy Bergeron, our stage manager. Hold your applause. Chrissy Bergeron, our stage manager, standing up and waving. In tech, we have the great Gary Benson and Teddy Rosenfeld, who is his assistant, and they do all tech with Tomar Ronan on sound. Amazing. Tomar, thank you. And we have the extraordinary director, Evie Abbott. Evie, where are you, dear? She's somewhere crying.
Fleeing from the limelight.
I just want you to know that every time we do this, it's in a different venue, and Evie must come with these extraordinary actors and figure out new entrances, new ways to go. So it's constantly being creative and contributing. And last but first, in this village, is our chief, our fire chief, putting out so many fires every single day. The indomitable and my extraordinary partner, producing partner, Jeannie Benson. I'd also like you to know that Jeannie is the daughter of Sidonia and Louis Lax, who were Holocaust survivors. She is continuing specifically in her mother's legacy of doing this work. And now I'm going to let this extraordinary cast introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Michael Boos, and I'm here in the honor of my grandfather-in-law.
Hello, my name is Almania Narula, and I'm here to honor the lives and the memories of those who, despite darkness, chose to persevere and find the light and resist.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Obaria. I'm here to contribute my artistic energies to telling and retelling this very important story.
Hi everyone, I'm Yam Steinberg. I'm here because my grandma is a Holocaust survivor, this is in my family, and this is my way of carrying their stories forward.
I'm Casey Adler, and I'm honoring my grandfather who fought in World War II.
My name is Niani Tati, and I'm here to learn and to grow and to teach.
Thank you. These are our swing actors. So they are standing by, knowing every single line of their gender, and it's a hell of a thing to ask anyone to do. But they often perform with us, and tonight they're here to be with us in solidarity. Just another word about Village. Truthfully, there's just all of you are part of that village. Everyone who came today is part of that village. I want to single out a person here who's helped run that village and I think had an incredible impact on my own capacity as a writer, and that's Gary Grossman, who is our actually our consultant. And Gary is the artistic director of a wonderful theater in Los Feliz called Skylight Theater Company that just celebrated its 40th year. So I think he knows what he's talking about. But thank you also in this village. I see my family is here. I see friends who are here. And I see those friends, that family, also donors are here, generous donors who make this work possible. Thank you. Thank you for being part of our village. And now I'd love to introduce again Dan Mizell, who's coming back now to help us moderate this talk back. Dan,
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Wendy, for bringing this play to the stage, and first the paper and then the stage. And then thank you to this wonderful cast and supporters who have helped bring this to life for all of us. It's certainly an enriching experience. Wendy, I thought I'd start with some of the thinking process behind this. We're at a bit of a transition point where those first-person narratives are fewer and fewer among us today. And ADL's surveys, along with many others, indicate that some knowledge of the Holocaust reduces the risk of anti-Semitic attitudes. And so as you faced this burden of how to inform and what to inform, how did you focus on, what were the key elements that you wanted to make sure that you included in this educational experience?
Thank you, Dan. This journey for me began June 2017 when I was commissioned to write it. And I was commissioned from a theater in Rochester, New York, and our 10 survivors immigrated there. And at the time, 4 of them were still alive, and now they're gone. And this play, Dan, came from the knowledge that we are losing our survivors and they're being able to impact others in person. The phone call I received from the artistic director was, Wendy, we've been part of bringing these survivors to middle schools and high schools and colleges for years, and they have changed young people's lives by not only telling their story, but telling them about trauma, how to survive trauma, their life lessons. And now we're losing them. In fact, that phone call from him came, he had just come from a funeral of yet another survivor. So we knew that, first and foremost, we need to continue to tell these stories, especially given the culture of the Holocaust deniers. The stories need to be told. The thinking process behind it was, well, my God, there's nothing as impactful as having an actual survivor in your presence and learning from them. We knew that this was going to be a theatrical presentation, which you saw, and we thought, you know what? This isn't going to be about an elder talking about the past. This is going to be about who they were when they were going through this horror and trauma. And we began to understand that, oh, it's a young cast. It's a young cast. And we will go back in time with them, in real time with them. We also knew we wanted it to be a teaching play. So it is the history of the Shoah, what you experienced. And for me as the writer, it was like Solomon. I mean, how do you pick whose story you're going to tell when every story deserves to be told? Every story. So I had to leave my heart and go into my analytical head and realize that in telling the history of the Shoah, there are specific events that need to be learned. And you saw them today. So it's the rise of Hitler, it's the Hitler Youth, it's, Kristallnacht. And so I began to look for the survivors who specifically spoke to those incidents. And through that, I knew I needed 10 because that's a minyan. And in the Jewish religion, that's a number in which you can study Torah, and that's just a gathering that's very sacred, the number 10. So we did 10. 10. These amazing actors, not just one, but 10, and all the other roles they have to do. And the only other piece, Dan, other than what I just mentioned, is I also felt incumbent that this couldn't just be the telling of horror. It had to be an experience of humanity. So what did that mean to me? That meant that I had to bring people here on this stage, not victims, people. And each person had their story, but they also had their character. Were they funny? Did they have a big mouth? Did they like girls? You know, you just saw it. And so I was fortunate in that although I only had 4 living survivors, I got to interview their families. And that was really helpful because although I had to study the testimonies through the videos, if you've ever experienced testimony, and I really recommend it, the Shoah Foundation is probably the most famous organization to have collected these testimonies. I know Jeannie's mom and dad's testimony is captured on video. When a survivor's giving testimony, of course, they're reliving their trauma, and they're very serious, of course, and it's sorrowful. But that's not the full nature of a human being. So we had to bring all those dimensions to make it relatable.
There's another emotion I want to come back to in a little bit on that point. It's one thing to bring drama to the stage. This is bringing trauma to the stage. And I understand that there might have been some special preparation for members of the cast. And so I'm wondering if some of you would volunteer to speak about that special preparation for this experience.
Michael. Well, we had a great opportunity to go visit the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, the LA Holocaust Museum. If you haven't gone, their collection and exhibit is exquisite, definitely worth checking out, on par with the Auschwitz exhibit that is being shown here. But I think that was day 2 of us being part of this show and kind of coming together as this family, as we all went to the Holocaust Museum and we had the opportunity to be guided through and had some of the very helpful and knowledgeable staff explain the stories of the exhibits and the history of the Holocaust in quite a bit of detail. And I think that for all of us was a really powerful experience because I know that each and every one of us came out of that visit to the museum with one little thing that we found, each individually, that really spoke to what this event was. For me, it was towards the end of the exhibit talking about the prisoners being taken to the concentration camps and having their hair shaved off. I don't remember which one of it was, but somebody asked, what did they do with the hair after? And they turned it into wigs, and they put it in upholstery. And the thought of getting a hand-me-down antique piece of upholstery, taking it in to get reupholstered, and finding human hair in there just sent a chill through my entire body. And I think that's really what made the horrors, and in a big way, the necessity of telling these stories vital. Because human hair was taken from people and put into couches and chairs. And allowing that, or I guess not allowing that to happen again, and creating a narrative and presenting these stories so people know that did happen, that is a very real thing that can happen in this world, and that is something that we need to prevent at all costs. I think that was the big part of that museum visit that was really important to the preparation of telling this story.
Thank you, Michael. Did anybody else want to share their experience preparing for this differently than they might prepare for another production? Yeah.
This sounds really dramatic when I say it like that, but it feels like I've been preparing for it all my life, because growing up in Israel, you really get a Holocaust education, in every form, every way, and every year, and throughout, and I feel like you get to a point, especially as a kid, when you're like, oh, I don't want to hear about this anymore. You get to this like, you can't think about these horrors anymore, but. It kind of forced me to reintroduce myself to this part of history and to this part of my history, and I think it's especially now so incredibly important to talk about and to not lose sight of our humanity. And I'm really honored to be able to be a part of something like that.
Thank you for contributing that. So I want to return to one of those emotions that hit me. One of the things that really struck me as authentic as I experienced this. My own aunt was a Holocaust survivor with a harrowing story. And it was remarkable to me when I heard her speak both to youth and to adults that there wasn't a hint of rage in her telling of the story. And I was wondering kind of where that rage went, or if it was ever there. And it made it into your play. There was, I don't hate, coming out of this experience. And those were the words from right out of her mouth. And so I wonder, Wendy, whether you contemplated that as you thought about what you needed to cover. And I also wonder if any cast members, might have anticipated that and wondered why it wasn't part of it.
As we know, these were 10 survivors who gave testimony, but there were many, 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 many who never spoke of it again. And I think you can speak to their families, and their families will tell you they wouldn't speak of it again for whatever reason. And, I have to presume that holding that in was very, very, very difficult, because the survivors who did give testimony, and especially the ones who went to schools like Sidonia Lax, Jeannie's mom, they were able to take something so horrible and turn it into teaching, and turn it into, okay, I went through this, it wasn't fair, I lost so much, but what's my choice with that? And that's where the word survivor really hits home, because I think there's some core choice with what am I going to do? How am I going to cope with this? And listen, some people just break. They're not strong enough, and they break, or they died young, or they self-sabotaged and committed suicide. But we felt, Dan, in this play, certainly there are survivors who hated, still alive today, who carry that hate. We felt a responsibility to spread the message of hope, not hate.
Thank you. There's a microphone in the center aisle here, and I'd like to invite folks who have some questions of their own to come to that mic. I just ask that you keep your questions short in case there are others that would like to chime in. So whenever you're ready, you can just head to the mic if you'd like. We talked a little bit about kind of action, calls for action, or we noticed the calls to action at the end of the production. And as you think about these world events that have coincided with the staging of the play, what comes to mind in terms of never again? Is it timeless? Is it the right time? How do we make sense of this continuing message in the light of ongoing cycles of violence where they occur?
I think, sadly, that this is not timely but timeless, that we will always be fighting hate. I know that I mentioned June 1, I was commissioned to write this play. A month later, we were watching the neo-Nazis march with tiki torches in Charlottesville, chanting, "The Jews will not replace us." That was 2017. I'd call that timely. And I'd call that timeless. So my personal way to hold this is that whatever war, and will always be, for me, I believe there will always be a war somewhere on this planet, but there's another war that's also being fought simultaneously, and we are the soldiers of that war, and that's the war in fighting hate. So I feel that while we're here, still here, we can ask ourselves, what can I do about that? It can be inviting someone into your home from another culture to get to know them, to get to respect them. It can be writing a check for any cause you believe in, ADL, our play. I mean, there's so many ways in which you can participate, depending on where, what particular issues move you. But truly, I think one of the strongest messages of the play is don't be a bystander. Be an upstander. And if you thought about it, if everyone on the planet would just pick their one cause and work toward that, whether it's anti-hate or racism or whatever cause, the climate change, wow. Be a little different world, I think.
True. Any questions? Yes. All right. Yes, Ginny.
Is this on?
Yes.
So if I wanted to volunteer, or if I wanted to help the production, what would I do?
So this is why she's the captain. Because she's always on watch, and she is always going, what didn't Wendy mention here? There's a table as you exit, and it's a table to stop if you're interested at all in signing up to volunteer with us, to get on our email list, because we can keep informing you of where we are and what we're up to. Come be a part of our village. We welcome you to be a part of our village. And I think it's really important that you understand, we've been doing this particular production since March of this year. We started at a high school. We started at Calabasas High. Remember, guys?
Yeah.
500 10th graders. Okay. And that was wild. But every time we do this, we're in a different venue. We did our public premiere at the Museum of Tolerance. We were very honored to present there, and I'm happy to tell you that in that front row, the cast can tell you how impactful this was for them. We invited survivors, their families and their caregivers, and there they were, and afterwards they stood, and one gentleman in particular spoke, and it was something. But know that really that we go where we are asked to go. We go where we serve. But fundamentally, we want to reach young people. We are going to schools, and specifically, we try to go to underserved schools. And we'll go to a church, we'll go to a temple, we'll go to a museum, but to be in the presence of young hearts and minds, and to think, gosh, maybe today we stopped a little bullying, maybe, or who knows what we might have sparked in someone.
Would you like to mention where you're going next, later this week?
Sure. Well, Dan, we're going to our hometown, which is Santa Barbara, where we're fortunate enough to live. We will be in Santa Barbara this Thursday. If you want to come up and come see this again, or you have friends there, there are flyers on that table telling you all about it. We have a performance during the day for about 700 public school students. And that evening is our public performance. We're calling that Raise Our Voices. And that's, of course, raising our voices against hate. And it's going to be quite a special evening. The core experience is, of course, the play, but we also have 2 choirs. We have an adult choir, a gospel choir. We have a teenage choir, the Dos Pueblos Jazz Choir. And we have a talkback as well.
Terrific. Oh, we have a question. Yes.
Actors, just bravo to you all. You really, you transported us to each of the characters and their circumstances and their family, what they did for a living. And I know as actors you don many different characters and embody them, but I'm wondering to hear from some of you how this particular play has transformed you.
I can speak to that. I think this play is incredibly powerful for me. So I'm Indian. I'm Sikh. I was raised, said this before, but I was raised in between India and Thailand. I was born in Thailand because I'm actually a product of, displacement and partition and my lineage. My grandparents fled what is now Pakistan, found the next country that was, not colonized. And when, in the western side of the world, the Holocaust was happening, the eastern side of the world, colonization and partition was happening. And I shared this with the cast a couple days ago. There's signs in Germany saying no Jews or dogs allowed. Similar signs saying no dogs or Indians allowed was placed everywhere in India or in Western places that were occupied by Indians. And I grew up when I was in India, as the swastika being a symbol of peace and unity. And I received a Holocaust education in 9th grade. And I remember something kind of broke in me that day. And it changed my world to see just how bad humanity can get and how bad humanity was allowed to get. And it's, when I learned about the Holocaust, it's a pattern that I've been seeing till today. We talked about this in the car, is that with Holocaust education, it's sort of this, there's a cognitive dissonance, because we have survivors that are no longer with us and aren't able to talk to us about it, but also people think as the Holocaust is this sort of isolated Jewish specific history. And the fact of the matter is it isn't. Everyone was affected by this. In fact, world leaders today are borrowing from Hitler and Hitler's tactics. Like Sikh, I'm Sikh, and my people are facing genocide right now. And so for me, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, y'all. The world's on fire, and I'm getting a little emotional. I'm an artist, I'm not a world leader. I'm not a superhero. I don't have a ton of money, and this is the only way I feel like I can help. Because these stories need to be told, because we can't keep doing this. This can't happen again. And regardless of where you're from, what side of the country, what turmoil, it cannot happen again. And we need to be aware of how bad it got. Everyone does. And so, for me, I don't know if that answers your question. I wanted a bit of a full circle, but yeah.
Thank you.
There's a quote from an artist I really, really like that I liked so much that I have a tattoo that represents it. She was being criticized for creating kind of like a commentary song about, I think, sexual assault. And it was a very like peppy song because it was trying to kind of show the contrast. And then some journalist was criticizing her, and she said that like years later she thought of the best response. They said, "Oh, you're making light of such a hard thing, such a terrible thing." And she said, "I'm an artist. My job is to go into the darkness and make light." And I think that's the impact of that we get to have being in this show. You know, that we get to go into the darkness and spread some light, especially going into schools and things like that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, yes, one more thought?
Just going to tag on
Yeah.
to that as well and say that, like, you know, going back to your question about how this specific play and embodying, or not your question, sorry, your question, about embodying characters and like specifically this one. And I think this also goes back to what Wendy was saying about when you were building this play, and, you know, it's so easy for the world to look at horrible things and boil the people who experience those things down to those horrible things. And I think that light and that, you know, the humanity, it like that comes from seeing people be real people. And it's like, I just read Man's Search for Meaning, which is every single person on planet Earth should read that book. And in it, he was talking about how like the humor in the camps was rampant. Like, you know, there were some people who, many of them are the kinds of people, or ones who died in the camps and such, but like who were just overcome by everything and gave themselves over to it. And there were people who like their resistance and their humanity and their light came through in the humor, even in the most impossible of places. And I think that like keeping that at its core is what has been a challenge for me in this play, because it's so easy to be like, this is horrible, and it is. But also, when we're faced with horrible things as human, we don't just sit there and go, oh, this is horrible. We fight against it, and we fight against it with passion, we fight against it with art, we fight against it with storytelling, we fight against it with humor and humanity and kindness. Like, and that's, you know, also, that's how we fight against hate, is by centering humanity. Like, there is no room for humanity when hate is what's all-encompassing and when fear is all-encompassing. They go hand in hand, so let's all remember our humanity, and that's it.
There's a job for you in our office, absolutely. The only thing that I'd like to add, you know, in what you all brought to the stage and how you wrote it, Wendy, is that, you know, many people are not aware of the diversity within the Jewish community. There's a tremendous amount of diversity, and, you know, 12 to 15%, depending on which study you're looking at, of the Jewish community are Jews of color. And so in some sense, you represented that on stage. But the intentionality with which you provided kind of a youthful and diverse collection of voices, I think really also undermined the universality of the themes. And it permeated our experience of the play. So thank you for that, and thank you for kind of that experience that will go forward that you've brought to all of us. Thank you all for coming. If you have friends that want to see it, or you want them to see it, let them know Santa Barbara on Thursday. Thank you.